and thank you for joining us for our November Municipal Forum, where we're joined by Piserchia, Deputy Mayor of Long Hill Township, who's also the recipient of this year's Alex DeCroce Public Leadership Award. So we're glad to have him. Welcome, Guy.
Thank you, Megan.
Great. And I first would like to acknowledge our sponsor, STL, Spatial Data Logic, Mr. Jack Flood, who will say a few words in a minute. Thank you, Jack, for being with us today. And you will also hear from Michael Stanzilis, who is our Vice President of Membership and Government Affairs, who will be interviewing Guy this morning. So we look forward to some back and forth as well. So I'm Megan Hunter. I'm the President and CEO of the Morris County Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Corporation, which is a division of the Chamber. So I welcome you on this rainy Monday morning. I hope everyone had a very happy Thanksgiving. And at the Chamber, we continue to fulfill our mission virtually. We connect, we convene, we educate, we advocate on your behalf. And we look forward to, of course, seeing you all in person, hopefully in a few months. But until then, please join us online. Visit our website under events calendar to find out all of the things that we're doing at the Chamber, including an upcoming holiday party. We have many networking events, and we do have 2 upcoming Economic Development Corporation events, including our annual Partners in Economic Development Awards event, as well as our Business Growth event. So I look forward to seeing you at both of those. So now I'd like to turn the program over to Jack Flood to say a few words as our sponsor. Jack?
Thank you, Megan. Pleasure to be here again, a proud sponsor of the Morris County Chamber of Commerce. These online events, as well as the in-person events over the last several years that we've sponsored, we find to be very beneficial, and you guys just do a really nice job with this for all of the Morris County community, as well as all of the towns that we support in that area. Spatial Data Logic's been around for 23 years, providing software for local government, many of which are Morris County towns. And we're always looking for better ways to provide better technology, better input, and feedback from citizens and businesses alike. So this has been a great forum, and we look to continue to support it in the many years to come. So thank you, Megan.
Great. So I look forward to hearing from Guy about his journey in public service, and would like to put in a public service announcement that our democracy works because all of us either serve on committees, or we run for election, or we at the very least attend meetings, which now I think can actually be easier because you can tune in right from the comfort of your own home. So please look to get involved in your community, and we thank those who are currently serving and who are elected officials and who are balancing their work life with their family life, with their public service as well. So thank you all, and now I'll turn it over to Mike Stanzilis to speak with Guy. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Megan, and good morning, Guy, and good morning, everyone. So it's an honor and a pleasure to have you on this with us this morning, Guy. We really appreciate all of the amazing things that you've done for your community and for Morris County and for New Jersey as a whole. So I do have your bio here somewhere. I think it's important that it get read because you've done so much, and it kind of gives a background as to where you come from before we get started here. So Guy Piserchia, he is an international banking professional with trading and management experience at various centers in New York, South America, and Asia. He has traded and directed teams during numerous currency crises and gained a reputation for excellent leadership skills. Guy transitioned success in leadership and banking into municipal government as the mayor of Long Hill Township and as a member of multiple council, county, and state committees, including the New Jersey League of Municipalities Executive Board, the New Jersey Conference of Mayors Legislative Committee, Morris County League of Municipalities Executive Board, Morris County Republican Committee, the Great Swamp Watershed Association Municipal Alliance and the Great Swamp Watershed Association Executive Board. Whew. Guy, that's a mouthful. You do so much. It's unbelievable how much you do. So I just want to get started. So first of all, if anybody out there, if you have any questions, just type them in the Q&A and we'll get to all your questions. But and Jack, Megan, jump in at any time. But really, what got you started on such an illustrious career in public service?
Well, first off, I want to thank Jack for sponsoring these events. And I'm not a spokesperson for the company, but I can say we in Long Hill Township use spatial data logic. And in fact, I think we were introduced to the company at one of the league conferences in Atlantic City. And we could not be happier with the product. That is just as a client. There's no other reason to say it other than it's true. And Mike, thank you for the introduction. It sounds a bit inflated to me. There are elected officials throughout the state that do the same thing as I do, and frankly, that you do too, Mike. So I think I get a lot of credit, or I get credit for things that many others do. So a shout out to everybody. Now, I guess your question is, how did I get involved? I guess in the community.
Yes. What got you started?
You referenced Wall Street. So I started on Wall Street, and at that time it was very difficult time-wise. I was up at 4:45 every morning, home at 8, and et cetera, et cetera. We moved off to Asia, as you referenced. But when I came back, I wanted to get involved in the community that we had left and now we're returning to. So I opened my mouth, and the next thing I know, the mayor, Suzanne Dapkins, God bless her, she passed on a couple of years back. She called me on a Sunday morning and asked if I would be willing to serve on the zoning board. In Long Hill Township, we have both land use boards, the planning board and the zoning board. And I, of course, said yes. And from that point on, I served there for 8 years.
Wow, so that's an incredible way to get started on, the zoning board, and the mayors are always a great recruiting tool to get people started. But, this was volunteer work for you. So why, what is it about you that really wanted to become a volunteer and help out your community? And then we'll get into your politics and that whole career later. But, you started out as a volunteer on the zoning board.
Well,
so.
I mean, like a lot of parents, I started coaching my children. So I met a lot of people in the community, and, it became more and more dear to me over time. And because of that, I thought maybe I might have something to contribute into how the town evolved. Some of the things that we liked about it, if we can try to maintain that, some of the things we would like to change in a positive way. I think the land use boards, in my case, the zoning board, accomplishes that. And in fact, to your point, that it's a good starting ground. When I first ran, I ran with somebody who I met on the zoning board. And when I was fortunate to be elected, over the next couple of years, all 5 members of the committee had come from one of the land use boards. So I think you're right. I think the zoning board or the planning board are great groups to start with, to at least begin to understand the town you live in.
Absolutely, that's how I got my start as well. So, but when you said you first ran, so what was it that made you decide to jump from being a volunteer into, carrying the bullseye on your back and run for an elected office? It's a big transition.
I think I was foolish enough to think it was a good idea at the time. One thing I am a little bit pleased with, over the years I was on I served on the zoning board. I was approached by both the Democratic Party in town and the Republican Party in town to run. I was a registered independent my entire voting life. So I was pleased that both parties thought I might be able to serve whatever interests that they believed were best. I ultimately did, in fact, run as a Republican, but I've never in any of the literature we've sent out or any of the you know, things that we put around, I don't emphasize party. And I think, Mike, you can speak to this as well. The people in your town don't care what letter comes after your name. What they do care about is their garbage and their the paving of their streets and their taxes. If I could sum it up, those are the three things that are always on. If I went on Facebook right now, one of those is going to be there.
Yeah, it's so true. What a wise man once said many years ago, all politics are local, and there is no R or D when it comes to getting your garbage picked up. So we do have a question. It's more of a comment from a member of the audience, and that would be Jay Weissman. You may know Jay Weissman, and I think his question or comment is simply moo. So I don't understand what that is. If it's too personal,
it's something we can discuss offline. I think it's
okay.
nothing bad,
All right.
bad. But Jay's a good friend.
We want to save your political
And
career.
speaking of volunteers, by the way, Jay volunteers for so many things in Long Hill Township. So you know, a shout out to Jay Weissman in that regard.
Big shout out to Jay. He does so much for the chamber also, with his entire world of bringing not-for-profits together with businesses. So moving on, what advice would you give to somebody who's wanting to start out in a career or not a career, but in public service? What, you know, you've done it, you've lived it for a long time. What would you say to somebody who's just wanting to look at the potential of public service?
Well, you know, have an open mind and being willing to listen to people is important. But I would also say, for those old enough to remember the Moody Blues, there's a line in one of their songs which says, "Some try to tell me thoughts they cannot defend." Don't be that person. If you're going to do anything in life, and certainly as an elected official, do your best to know what it is that you're talking about. You know, and I don't know a lot. I know, but I do know a lot of people that know a lot, like you and like Megan. So research what it is that you're going to discuss, and certainly what you're going to vote on, and be able to defend those opinions with facts. You don't want to defend an opinion with an opinion. You want to be convincing, and I can tell you, there are many times where I might have looked at something one way, and then when you listen and you educate yourself on an issue, you may come out on the other side.
It's a good point. You know, do your homework, I guess, is what you're trying to say. And yeah.
Exactly.
So, you know, the Board of Adjustment is a great place to start, like you had said, but there's a few other things I noticed in your bio, which was actually more than a few, it's a lot. And that is all of the different committees and organizations you're with throughout the state and the county. You know, talk about how that has helped you, impacted your career. League, Conference of Mayors. I know it's a pleasure for me to be your wingman for the executive board for the League for Morris County, and we also serve on the Conference of Mayors as well. So you got a lot out of that over the years. So what could you share with our audience here in terms of how that has helped you?
Well, if I could just give a brief story, what triggered all of that, and these organizations that I was blessed and fortunate enough to be invited to be a member of, soon after I was elected, we received an invitation to go to the Morris County League, what you and I now serve on. The Morris County League of Municipalities have these dinner meetings. And so I thought to myself, oh, this might be a good way to learn, you know, about Morris County. So we went to that meeting, and when they took roll call, as they do, they said Long Hill Township, and we, of course, said present. They stopped the meeting and said, oh, Long Hill Township does exist. It is part of Morris County. And frankly, I was embarrassed, and I promised myself at that point that for better or for worse, Morris County and the state would know Long Hill Township and where it was located. So anytime I had the opportunity to be to serve on one of these committees, and the first one was the New Jersey League Legislative Committee. And the reason that is such a good committee and it has served us well in Long Hill Township and hopefully all towns is it's made up of elected officials from throughout the state and bipartisan. And I probably should have said that right from the beginning. All of these groups are bipartisan. Nobody, when you walk into these meetings, you check your party at the door. And in addition to the elected officials, you have planning officials, the Society of Municipal Engineers, clerks, administrators, tax collectors, purchasing managers, finance offices, and municipal assessors from throughout the state. And it's divided up into 4 groups. I should remember them, but I'll look at it. The General Committee, Tax and Finance, Intra-Municipal, and the planning groups, those 4 groups. I served the first few years, no coincidence, on the planning group, and then I moved over into the municipal affairs group. And they talk about all the proposed bills that the league believes could affect municipalities throughout the state. And I wanted to look it up before. There's something like 2,500 bills are proposed every year. It gets whittled down to whatever the league believes would influence, affect municipalities, and then they whittle that down even further to the ones that are I don't want to say controversial, but that have some give and take to them or both sides. And I can tell you, in all the years I've served now, this is my 11th year, so right out of the gate in 2010, never has anybody ever asked me or have I asked them what their party was. People express their opinions in these individual groups, and then we come together at the end, and there's a voice vote on whether we would support, oppose, or hold for more information. And it really is a beautiful thing. It's the way government should work, where you express your opinion, you explain why you believe what you believe, and then there's a democratic vote, and that's the stance that the league takes when they present it back. Of course, the League Legislative Committee, nor the Conference of Mayors Legislative Committee, which is made up, of course, of mayors and elected officials throughout the state. They don't get to decide, right? The Assembly does and the Senate does. Then, of course, the governor signs or does not sign. But the recommendations are made from those 2 committees in bipartisan fashion. And honestly, I'm very pleased and honored to serve on that, both of those committees.
Do you feel that Trenton and your legislators are listening to what comes out of the legislative committee for the league and the Conference of Mayors?
Absolutely. And I think what ends up happening is, in addition to what happens at the league, I think all of us have been introduced to a lot of the senators and the assembly folks. And they do hear. They don't always agree, but welcome to America. You don't have to agree, but you certainly get to voice your opinion. And I do think they listen.
Great. So let's talk about economic growth. For your view on it for Long Hill or for the county or state writ large. What are your thoughts on economic growth in terms of your position as an elected leader, and what are some of the challenges and roadblocks that you've been facing?
Well, Long Hill is challenged in one very specific regard. 91% of our taxes comes from residents, so the rateable being the resident themselves. Only 9% comes from businesses. So we're challenged there. And we have a very vocal community that loves the appearance, the semi-rural nature of Long Hill Township. Frankly, so do I. When we were looking for a home way back when, I just wanted trees, having come from Jersey City, where I think it's in the master plan, you're only allowed 1 tree per block. So to me, I wanted I wanted trees and a rural nature. I live right next to, it may be the closest working farm to Manhattan in the state. I can't imagine there's many closer than the one. I can see it from my window. And I live right across from the 9,000 acre Great Swamp watershed. So we're blessed in Long Hill. But because of that, I think the community wants to keep what it has. And that's a challenge. And so to dovetail into your question, how do we help the businesses that do exist? And we're going through a challenge now, like a lot of communities throughout the state. Our biggest rateable in town has lost 3 of its, or is in the process of losing 3 of its stores. And Megan and I discussed this through no fault of their own or anything that the way they manage them all. You have Pet Value, which is a national chain going out of business. You have King's, which is being bought by Acme, and they're closing down several of their locations in this area, including the one in Gillette, which is in Long Hill. And Joseph A. Banks, because of the evolution to online and the lack of foot traffic. So now we have these 3 stores there. And so I've been in touch numerous times over the last few weeks with the owner of the mall. And one thing we're working on, and, you know, just because a business owner has a, company like he does, doesn't mean he knows everything. So I mentioned the whole thing with Fair Share, COA, and we have the numbers for all of the surrounding communities, and of course, Long Hill Township. This is some marketing material or factual material that he can present to brokers and potential tenants that there's going to be. This isn't something, and Mike, you're well aware of this, this isn't something that's talked about. These units, these residents, they're coming. And if you own a mall, you want to know that.
Yeah, good marketing on your part. That's a lot of people in public service don't quite understand the value of marketing for their towns and all the different businesses and quality of life. And I think, Megan and the EDC has done an outstanding job helping towns learn that. For those towns that want to grab that information, and run with it, not everybody does, but clearly you are a leader in that respect. Let's move on to the pandemic. So the pandemic has hit everybody in so many different ways, but start out with, how has it, hit your businesses? I know you mentioned the three businesses closing. How are the other businesses faring in your town? And then we could talk about how it's impacting your residents.
Well, restaurants, they're having a really, really rough go of it. So we do our best to, on Facebook and our virtual meetings that we hold, to speak up to the residents. The residents love our restaurants, the business community in general, and restaurants as well. They always get involved in the community. They through their generosity, through their sports sponsorship of the Little League and Pop Warner teams, etc. So it is our opinion, it's time for us to give back to them. So there's a movement in town. It just pops up organically on its own, where residents, even without, honestly, encouragement from the township committee, they're saying eat out if you're in a position to do so. If you don't feel comfortable eating out, take out if you could. So I think it's really a community effort, not just, frankly, the township committee. We do what we can, but and as far as the other businesses, like we said, the mall, et cetera, it's a challenge. And Megan and I have spoken about this. We have a local chamber of commerce that we meet with quite often, and we try to do whatever we can, whether it's allowing the businesses to use the sidewalks, something you typically wouldn't allow. But like a lot of communities, we've done that, extending the hours, although that is now limited. And I think there was an announcement earlier today. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to review it coming out of Governor Murphy. I don't know if there any changes were made. I know he's working very hard and he wants to keep the minimum or the maximum, I should say, restaurant capacity at 25%. And I hope that remains in place, assuming, everyone acting responsibly.
Yes, assuming that. So what about your residents, and how's the town doing in terms of the residents and their resiliency, and you being a public servant and a leader there, how has that affected you in terms of the way you deal with your residents?
Well, well, it always seems, I joke that in spite of us, the good Lord works in mysterious ways and he puts the right people in the right place at the right time. Our current mayor, Brendan Ray, happens to be, he's a lawyer, which I will hold that against him. Hopefully, Megan, you're not a lawyer, but he's also a virologist. So very early on in the pandemic, he was the right person at the right time. We purchased 4 UV machines, which are used to disinfect our ambulances, our police vehicles, rooms that are used, certainly at the time, that had been used consistently until we went all virtual. So, and all the protocols we put in place very early on, which have become so commonplace throughout the state and frankly throughout the world, we were a step ahead, and we were a step ahead, honestly, because of Mayor Ray.
That's fantastic. So let me see if we have any other questions here in the chat. Good comment again from Jay Weissman. Long Hill Mayor and Town Council has done a great job communicating with residents during this pandemic. Thank you, Jay. So we're going to go back a little bit to the SDL and Mr. Flood and your relationship from a town with SDL. Talk to us a little bit about how your use of their product, whether that's customer facing or behind the scenes, has impacted the way you run your town.
Well, I'm laughing because I'm often accused of being, and by you as well, Mike, a master delegator.
I know it firsthand.
Like I said, I look in the mirror and I recognize I'm not the smartest person in the room, but in many cases, I know who the smartest people in the room are. So in the case of SDL, our administrator and our clerk and the employees at Town Hall have become experts at using it. They may from time to time come to us to add a different component of the product, and that's where the Township Committee and where I might have some input. But in actual use of it, I'd be lying if I said I know how to use it. Look, I have problems turning on my computer. Before we started this meeting, I was asking for help. How do I get a virtual background so I don't have my, office here with, it looks like an explosion happened. So I'm not a technology expert by any stretch, but I know smart technology people.
So, and that's why you have Jack and SDL. So again,
That's right.
But it's, it's sort of an acknowledgement of your leadership, though, because you are a great leader. I've seen you for years doing wonderful work, and now, like I said, I'm your wingman over here at the League of Municipalities. It's putting the right people in the right seats who understand how to use that technology, and clearly you've done that. I guess we're going to go back up to a couple of things we'd covered prior to this. So, getting the town involved in the League of Municipalities. There's some towns that are involved, there's some that aren't. What are some of the advantages of bringing your town on board into the League of Municipalities? I've gone back and forth with this for years. When I first started in this, God rest his soul, the mayor, Art Ondish, was the mayor of Mount Darlington. He's the one who dragged me in, just like you, and put me on the land use board. But he would go to everything involved with the league, and he actually became the president of the state league during the year of Hurricane Sandy. But there were detractors who said, why are you doing all this? You're wasting your time. And then there were, I personally felt like it brought a lot of value to the town. So what is your, how do you feel that that's helping the residents of the town?
Well, and first off, and God bless Art.
Yeah.
Art's one of the first people I met. I don't know. He was everywhere. I went to a grand opening of a new bakery, dessert ladies here in town, and I look across and I say, "Wow, that looks like that person I met down in Trenton, Art Ondish. But why would he be in Long Hill?" Well, somehow he knew the owners of the business, and it was like there was a hologram of him. He was everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And frankly, I think the answer to your question is pretty simple. None of us, have a monopoly on good ideas. And when you meet elected officials from other communities, they've done things that you haven't done, or maybe you've contemplated, or things you hadn't even thought of. And the interaction of ideas that happen at these committees are often, you bring them back, and sometimes it's best to learn vicariously from somebody else's experience, for good or for bad. So there's no downside, in my opinion, to being involved with the New Jersey League or the Conference of Mayors or the Morris County League. There's no downside.
Yeah.
It perplexes me anybody would ever say something like that to you. I think it goes back to what I said. Some try to tell me thoughts they cannot defend. Well, you know what? If somebody were to say that to me, I'd say, explain to me the downside to meeting the mayor from Maplewood or the mayor from, Freehold, and discussing ideas about how they handle certain situations, whether it's anything from COA to school funding, to how to handle flooding. Long Hill Township has flooding problems.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, I met with the mayors that's how I met the mayor and the elected officials in Parsippany and Bound Brook, because they had already lived it. So I say, who knows more about this than I do, which are most people, and I call them, and then we sit down and learn from each other, I hope.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a great way just to share best practices. I see SDL, Jack Flood, you usually get a booth at the annual meeting in Atlantic City, if I'm not mistaken. That's where I was first introduced to you, like 6-7 years ago.
It was sorely missed this year. I mean, there were a lot of conferences that went virtual. Some of them were done very well, some of them not so well. The one thing that we got value, we did participate in the virtual version of the League of Municipalities. Happy to be a part of that group, want to support them where we can, because again, for us, getting that time with a mayor or a council person about what we do and how we do it, that's the only way we can communicate. I can send as many emails or flyers and whatever. I mean, elected officials like yourselves, the only time you're going to hear the story about why this is something you should consider is, again, at a large gathering like that, which is why we're a part of the municipal managers group or part of a number of other groups that very happy to support, because honestly, it's the only time we can have that communication. And that was probably the one thing about the league show this year that we missed, was that networking, that ability to catch up. I mean, I can't tell you how many mayors and councilwoman people and even just end users that we get a chance to say hello. How are you? How's your family? What's new? What's the problems going on? How can we help you? What can we do better? That is the part that this whole pandemic world has kept us so isolated and so bubbled in what we do. That's been a real challenge. Even for our company, I mean, we went virtual first week of March. So we were set up to be virtual completely as a company since Sandy days, when we realized when Sandy occurred, power outages and all of our towns trying to work in those environments. I have 5,000-6,000 users that are, in different parts of the state that I have to be able to have my folks support and get access to. So we had that in place for snowstorms and everything else. And thank God we were able to transition and pivot real quickly into a remote world. And actually, as a part of that, back in March, we helped about 50 different towns do that themselves, providing remote access solutions, helping them activate parts for their portal online for citizen interaction. And Long Hill included, with many others. We're just kind of throwing a helping hand and trying to hunker down and get through all this. And we're still doing that 6+ months later, which is a real challenge that I think the weary nature that my employees are starting to feel working from home and not being able to come into the office and see people and understand things are the same things I hear from some governments that are quasi in and out. They can't talk to the residents. Guy, just the interaction between a construction official and the contractors wanting to come in and asking a question is just something that is not realistic in this day of age. And going to the ability to write emails or to be able to communicate electronically, it's a struggle. It's change. And I don't think it's going to completely go away after we get past this. And I think a lot of towns like Long Hill and many others have transitioned the best they can, but it's still a struggle and it's still just not the same. And I feel for all of my users of the software around the state that are struggling with this, and the fear factor too. We had several towns that were never really quite fully closed, and what took a COVID event to occur before they finally did. And I feel bad that some folks in some of those towns made those decisions. They made them with good reasons, and I'm sure they were looking out for the health and welfare of everyone else. But these are tough decisions, and when it goes back to the mayor and council that have to make those decisions, you don't have a rule book on that one. It's not like anybody has any advice on how do you deal with a pandemic and this happens, and I feel bad for all of them because I know I dealt with it from a company side of things. But the other side is it looks like there's an end in sight, and it looks like we're going to get there. It looks like it's maybe not going to be as bad as we think, and I hope, and knock on wood and everything else. But all of our towns in the state have dealt with various different disasters. Again, I go back to Sandy as one in particular, the way it affected so many towns in the state. I had so many towns that were dealing with issues and problems and mass destruction and everything else. We'll figure out a way, we'll get there.
Yeah, we will get there. So, speaking of figuring out a way, Guy, and tough decisions, which Jack just referred to, some of the legislation that's recently gone through that is going to impact towns, or the referendum. So let's, what about the cannabis referendum and body cameras? Start where you want to start on those two, and how your town is dealing with it or going to deal with either of those items.
So
For those who don't know, the governor signed into effect legislation requiring all police to have body cameras, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So again, I don't know if by luck or by design, Long Hill was a little bit ahead of the curve on this one. Several years back, we, on the advice of the police chief, had moved towards a trial period on body cameras. And ultimately, I think last year, I forget exactly when, we permanently, they've been in use in Long Hill for 3 years or so. And now they're permanent. The committee, the township committee, when we discussed it, it was our opinion for the public's safety, for the safety of the police officers, it was best to have documentation of any interaction that law enforcement has with the community. So I fully support it. So I don't know if that answers your question. And the township committee,
my question. Yeah,
the township committee unanimously approved it. So
follow-up question for you on that is, I guess the expense associated with it, but more so the expense of managing the data over the course of years. That data is going to pile up into a large cloud storage expense. And then, of course, the OPA requests are near and dear to Jack's heart as well. His system does a great job with handling OPA requests. There could be a lot of cost associated with that. I don't know if you've had a lot of that hit you yet or not.
There's no question there's a cost, and we discussed that. And in our opinion, going back to zoning board days or planning board days, the benefits outweighed the negatives. In our opinion, it's better to have that data, even though there's a cost associated with it. We think over time, it pays for itself, and it also protects law enforcement and the public at large. So, like a lot of things that are for the benefit of the community, there's a cost involved. In our opinion, it's a cost worth paying.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's just a matter of some departments, they're so busy with the body camera Oprah request, they have to assign a police officer almost full time just to edit that. And of course, you know, things that are under investigation, you can't Oprah, but once they've been dismissed or educated, it's a different story. So the cannabis referendum, what is your stance on that? And what is the governing body's stance or the residents' stance on? Obviously, the residents, you know, overwhelmingly voted yes on it. Do they still want it in their backyard at the same time?
Well, that's a very pointed question now, isn't it? We haven't discussed it at length. We may have discussed it with each other a little bit, touching upon it. I can tell you I voted no. But the fact is, it passed 70-30. So that is the will of the people. And of course, it will become law, I guess, once the bill works its way through and the governor inks it. The reason I voted no, you know, so this is a personal opinion here, is there's, as I understand it, no reliable test to know whether somebody is driving under the influence or is not. And the problem with that is, and then it dovetails into the other reason why, on one hand, I appreciate it, and it probably is best because I think the law as currently exists disproportionately hurts lower income communities and minorities. I don't dispute that, and I absolutely believe that it should be decriminalized. But the problem is, I don't think you're helping in that regard now, because what's going to happen is, I'm not a lawyer, but it's going to be too full of holes now that somebody stopped to be able to really prove whether they have driven under the influence. And I think it again will disproportionately hurt lower income communities. Once there's I mean, look, we have to, the law is the law. And I probably am backing my way into answering your question. I would not support, and I can't speak for the rest of the council, I would not support the sale in Long Hill Township. That's my opinion.
So by not supporting it, would you support an ordinance not allowing the sale of recreational marijuana in Long Hill Township?
Boy, you're really, I didn't answer the question as directly as you wanted it. I would vote.
Well, the reason I asked that, and I'm not trying to, you know, go hard here, but a lot of towns are bantering around or have put out ordinances not allowing the sale of this in their towns.
Well, look, I would support no. It would not allow sale in town. But again, we have 4 of the committee members, and that will be discussed in public. Mm-hmm. As you know, once the bill is signed by the governor, towns will have 180 days to opt in or opt out. If they opt out, they can opt in at any time. If they opt in, they must remain for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So what's the downside to opting out when you can opt in at any time? The theory is that other towns will have a head start on you, and maybe it would not be a viable business. So if you opt out, it probably means that you're out. I would think. I just don't see, you know, there are towns, I don't know what the local, the neighboring towns are discussing here. But, you know, hopefully I answered your question.
Absolutely.
I would vote no. I did not support it being legalized. Now that it will be, I do not support the sale of it in Long Hill Township.
So you display a characteristic that is very non-political or politician-ish, if you will, and you answer questions directly, you know, which I really appreciate about you. And I think your constituents appreciate it, that you don't dance around the question, you don't avoid the question, you just answer questions directly. I think that's a key to your success. So we're getting close to the end here. What, anything exciting, anything new, different in Long Hill? You want to talk a little bit about the sewer system, which is pretty big, if you ask me. What's going on with that?
If I could, I don't know if we still have a couple of minutes. I learned a lot during Sandy. Sandy happened soon after I was elected. And what's the saying? Good writers borrow, great writers steal outright.
Yeah.
Well, what had happened then, Long Hill Township was 100% without power, as a lot of towns were, but we were still 100% without power, essentially 5 and 6 days in. We were 50% without power 11 days in, and we didn't come back online fully until day 15. I referenced that because the governor at the time, Governor Christie, what he did on a daily basis is have meetings where he'd have his cabinet members. So he would almost be like the bad example. I was going to say the circus leader, but it wasn't a circus, right? He orchestrated like an orchestra leader, and he would have each of his cabinet heads give us a speech. And we thought to ourselves, Jay Wiseman was one of the people that helped design this. So what we did is every day at 10 o'clock, well, we would meet, discuss what we needed to with the head of schools, the OEM director, the first aid director, et cetera, the administrator, and we would discuss. And then we invited the public in, and that was hard, right? We had the Boy Scouts go out and give out pamphlets. So it started out, I mean, there were a couple hundred people at these meetings in the morning, and they were upset. They were tired, they were cold. They were maybe not as bathed as they would normally like to be. And we found that what people want is to be treated like adults. They want the facts. They may grumble and maybe yell just a touch. And so over time, we learned that the best way to deal with any situation really is just give it to them straight. Don't tell them what they want to hear, tell them the truth. And I think that has served us well over these 10 years. And that's what, whether we had Riley and Quinn years later or any kind of situation, we tell people what we believe is the case and what the facts are. And, like COA, people are not upset at a fair share. They're not happy with that. But we give it to them straight as best we can. And maybe they still don't like the answer. Okay, so let's talk about the sewer referendum and the ultimate sewer sale. We started discussing that in 2014. And there were a lot of moving parts to that. I mean, we met with the BPU director at the time, Rick Morose, to go over, what it would mean and what you needed to do in terms of engineering studies. Back to your point, if we could circle back, the mayor of Haddonfield had just sold their sewer and their water system. And so we called him and I said, "Ooh, could you help us out with any of the documents and what you did?" Because they originally were going to go to sale, didn't have enough support, waited a year or 10 years actually, or however long it was. And they ultimately did go out to sale and it overwhelmingly passed. So he gave us a data dump of all the materials they had, and we kind of piggybacked off it. So there you go, meeting somebody from another town that had already lived it. So we debated it as a council for a couple of years, whether we should do that, whether we should keep it and invest in it. And ultimately we decided, because we hadn't as a town really invested a lot of money going back 25 years. It was an antiquated system. It had become more of an albatross. It wasn't an asset. So we went out to referendum in 2017. It failed, I think 52-48 in a close vote. Now we knew that from a financial perspective, we needed to get out of the sewer business. So we waited a couple of years, And maybe we didn't educate the public as well as we should have the first go around. And that was on us. And we accepted that. So we went out to referendum again in 2019. And this time it passed 70-30. So it was overwhelming. And most of the people that voted no, I think, were more concerned that if you upgrade the sewer system, you would build more. You could, or if you didn't build, upgrade the sewer system, you wouldn't have to build fair share housing, which of course is categorically false. So it passed this time. And as a result of it, Long Hill Township, it's closed. The purchase price has been paid. And Long Hill Township, as of this moment, as we are discussing it, is debt-free. And I know you're going to say, is that a good thing? So I'll throw it back to you.
So yeah, so debt-free. Guy and I have had numerous conversations about, along with other mayors, about debt at the municipal level. Obviously, too much debt's not a good thing, but is being debt-free a good thing in the era of really low rates, almost free money, leveraging other people's money? So what's your take from a municipal standpoint on debt or being debt-free?
Well, personally, I think being debt-free, whether personally or as a municipality, is always best. You know, that my dad used to always say, he doesn't want the wolf at the door. I guess back in the day, if you owed money, they sent somebody around who would convince you to pay it. So I love the idea of being in a position of being debt-free. I fully appreciate that with rates being where they are, it's an optimal time if you need to borrow, And we're going to have that tough conversation next year during the budget conversations, because for the years we couldn't afford to maybe invest in a ladder truck, for example, or in a new ambulance, or any number of capital expenditures. Now those conversations will take on a different tone. Financially, we're in a position to have those conversations, and I look forward to it. Some people want a municipal pool. Some people want more open space. We're going to have some spirited conversations regarding this, and I look forward to them. I don't know what the community wants. I suspect, my wife wants a municipal pool. So, I don't. So I probably shouldn't say that here, because there are a lot of people in town that would like a municipal pool, but we'll discuss it. And maybe they're right. Maybe we should have one. I don't know.
It depends on the town. If you have a spot for it, the people love municipal pools. And Jay Weissman would probably be a real good candidate to be the swim coach teacher there. He just chimed in on the argument with you and your wife as to who would win that. We'll let Jay.
The only arguments I've ever won with my wife is when she's not around. I win all of those, 100%.
Yeah. The audience of none. Well, listen, Guy, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you here, the Alex DeCroce Award winner for 2020. You are truly a public servant and a great leader. We want to thank you for being here, and Jack Flood from SDL, Jay Weissman, of course, the celebrity audience member that's here today. Any closing words from you, Guy, before we hand it back to Megan Huncher?
First off, thank you again. I'm flattered to have been honored with the Alex DeCroce Award. There are many people that do exactly what I do. So on behalf of everyone who's at least as or more deserving than me, I accept the award, and I appreciate that the Chamber thought to honor me with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Megan?
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for being with us today, and congratulations again. Thank you for your service, and thank you, Michael, for your expert interview, and Jack, thank you as well for being with us today and for sponsoring our municipal forum. So thank you, everyone, for being with us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Same to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.